debate stage. Because as the saying goes, if you've got something to say, say it to my face.
The Democratic National Committee holds its virtual roll call on the 1st of August this week. While the roll call itself may be a mere formality because Kamala Harris seems to have garnered the required number of delegates, over 4,000 delegates from all 50 states of the United States will vote to elect the official Democratic nominee. So far, there is no other contestant, which makes Harris's nomination almost a certainty. At the end of the roll call, Kamala Harris will become the first woman of color, first African-American woman, and a person of Indian origin to be a major party's presidential nominee. Kamala Harris is the daughter of immigrants from Jamaica and India. She's had a career with many firsts. She became America's first Indian-American senator back in 2017 when she was inaugurated. She's California's first female and South Asian Attorney General. In 2021, she became the first woman to become Vice President, in addition to being the first Black or Asian American person as Vice President of the United States. She was raised by her Indian scientist mother, Shyamala Gopalan, who emigrated to the United States back in the early 60s as a student. She met Harris's father, Donald Harris, while they were in college at the University of California, Berkeley. If Kamala Harris were to win the general election in November against former President Donald Trump, she would become the first ever woman president of the United States. But this is not the first time that Harris is running for the top job. Harris announced in 2019 that she would run for the White House in the 2020 presidential cycle. But most of her bid at that time was riddled with campaign hiccups. She was never really able to gain momentum in what was a crowded Democratic field, and eventually she had to drop out of the race even before the first primary happened. Interestingly, Harris in that campaign ran further left of Joe Biden, who eventually won the Democratic nomination. A high point in that race was when, during one of the debates, Harris pushed Biden on his previous record when it came to desegregation and busing of students. But that did not stop Biden from picking Kamala Harris as his running mate at the top of the Democratic ticket, which the Democrats went on to win in 2020. Earlier, in her role as California's lead prosecutor, she was criticized for how she championed tough truancy policies when she was the Attorney General for the Sunshine State. Critics also argued that her policies perpetuated inequities in criminal justice system and disproportionately affected families of color. Harris later said that she regretted some of those decisions. During her 2020 presidential bid, Harris challenged Biden to the left on several criminal justice issues like ending solitary confinement or implementing a national standard on the use of deadly force. But her tough-on-crime track record as a prosecutor, a district attorney, and the Attorney General of California during the 1990s and the 2000s is a clear reminder of what a complicated and contradictory legacy she has on criminal justice.
You've seen what's happened to San Francisco. It was the best city maybe in our entire country 15 years ago, and now it's barely livable. That's what she's the one that started. She was an original defunder. She was a defunder of the police.
Despite Kamala Harris's underwhelming performance in the 2020 Democratic presidential primary, Joe Biden still nominated her to be his running mate, making her the first Black woman and the first person of Indian origin to be nominated by a major party for national office. The announcement at that time was celebrated by many in the party as a breaking of the glass ceiling. But things got off to a rocky start when she entered the White House. She overstepped in an interview with NBC's Lester Holt when answering why she had not yet visited the border. She also got bad press for the high attrition amongst her staff, and she had consistently low approval ratings early into her tenure as vice president. But Harris found her mojo back with an issue that resonated among most women across America. When the Supreme Court of the United States overturned a long-standing judgment on abortion by canceling the Roe v. Wade verdict, which had been the cornerstone on this issue since the 1970s, Harris said that the Supreme Court's overturning of that decision galvanized her. She in fact rewrote an entire speech that she was supposed to deliver at an event on maternal health on that very day in 2022. That became the single biggest talking point issue for the Democrats in the midterm elections in 2022, in which the Democrats won big. She became the primary messenger of the Biden White House on abortion and reproductive rights. Additionally, she also campaigned pretty aggressively for gun safety. She's tried to connect with more women and people of color during her tenure as vice president. She was also praised by progressives for a forceful call for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. Throughout her vice presidency, Harris, though, has still struggled to define herself. She's been juggling an issues portfolio that has included very difficult topics like voting rights, for example, and then, of course, the huge tide of immigrants who are coming into the United States illegally from Central America. On the voting rights issue, she made an effort to try and bolster the Voting Rights Act, but that bill failed in the US Congress. On migration, Harris was criticized by those on the right for not spending enough time on the border. In fact, Donald Trump consistently attacks her for being a border czar, as he calls her, and still failing to control the massive influx of illegal entrants into America. But in the days since Biden decided to withdraw and then endorsed her to be the Democratic nominee, she has quickly made the party leadership and the party's rank and file to rally behind her. She's managed to get the support of former Democratic presidents Barack Obama and Bill Clinton.
We called to say Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and to do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office.
Oh my goodness.
The Democratic leadership in both the House as well as the Senate have also supported her. She's also got the support of more than 24 Democratic governors and tons of senators and representatives. Harris' allies have argued that much of the criticism against her is a result of racism and overt sexism against the country's first woman of color in such a high position. Now they see the entire country, over the last couple of weeks since Biden withdrew, is seeing in Harris what her allies have seen in her for years. But one critical decision she's got to make is who she chooses as a running mate. The polls have shown her to be doing better than Biden against Trump, but crucially, she is still trailing Trump in most of the battleground states, whether it is in the Rust Belt or in the Sun Belt. Here's a look at how the leading contenders for Harris's VP pick line up on critical political skills that they could offer to a Democratic ticket. Of course, their matchup will be against Donald Trump, who is very hard on issues like immigration, women's reproductive rights, and of course, this whole system, as he calls it, the establishment, which is out to get him, despite his multiple felony charges and convictions, and also his running mate, J.D. Vance. So, here are the options that Harris has. Number one, Senator Mark Kelly, who represents Arizona. It's also a swing state, and it was Arizona that helped cement Biden's victory 4 years ago. Before Biden dropped out of the race, Arizona was looking increasingly tough for the Democrats. The Harris campaign may be tempted to use Senator Kelly to put that state and its 11 electoral college votes back in play. Kelly had won statewide in Arizona in 2020, and then he won again in 2022 with 51% of the vote. But there is perhaps no swing state more crucial and more big than Pennsylvania. And that means Pennsylvania's Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro is straight away one of the leading contenders to be on the Harris ticket. Shapiro won in 2022. He was the highest vote getter in any gubernatorial election in Pennsylvania's history. In fact, a Fox News poll recently found that 60% of Pennsylvania voters viewed him favorably. That is not an easy feat in what is an extremely divided state. Pennsylvania has 19 electoral college votes. If Kamala Harris were to lose Pennsylvania, which Biden won in 2020 and Hillary Clinton lost in 2016 to Donald Trump, then she would need to win almost every other swing state to get the White House. The third option is Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. He's another top contender, but the electoral college calculus is not in his favor. While Trump has made promises to win Minnesota, he's visited the state multiple times, the state has almost always leaned Democratic when it comes to presidential races. In November, if Harris needs Walz's help to win Minnesota, then she's most likely losing in other must-win states. So it boils down to balancing the ticket. Harris, who is a California liberal, a woman of color who may have limited appeal in the more rural parts of America, will need a white male candidate to balance out the ticket, much like Obama did when he picked Biden as his running mate.